Hello, my name is Dr. Tiffany Tyler-Garner, and I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Alliance, where we're dedicating our time, talent, and resources to improving conditions for children in the areas of education, economic well-being, safety, and health. Welcome to our first podcast, where we'll explore mental health with Policy Director Annette Dawson Owens, Senator Dina Neal, and Rucker.
Thank you for joining us today, Senator Neal. So happy to have you here. I know that recently you've done a town hall with Canyon Springs and seen a lot of the things happening in our community surrounding mental health. Can you share some of what you're seeing and some concerns?
So one of the things that popped up was during COVID, how children may not have had the opportunity to, I guess, mature within a school environment, that they actually were prevented from that assimilation, right? So you come from middle school, and then literally the 2 years that you were supposed to have been in high school, you are actually at home. And so by the time you get to high school, you're in 10th grade, and this is your first encounter with the environment with seniors, juniors, and other students. And so it appeared that there was this issue of maturity, immaturity, and then no ability for staff to cope and deal with that issue, right? I mean, because the question came up, I was talking to Assemblyman Tom Roberts, and he literally pointed that out, and he said that, you know, maybe that's the thing that we should be talking about when we talk about school violence. Why is a child feeling this level of anxiety or feeling like they may not have the capacity to fit in to the school environment, and maybe reacting in ways that they probably wouldn't have reacted in if they had had a chance to be in a school environment for 2 years versus the absence of it, right? Because immaturity is real, and we know that middle school, I'll probably change our whole lives, like we all hated middle school. By the time we got to high school, we were literally trying to figure it out, but 9th grade was our passage, right? It's like our rite to passage to high school to figure it out.
Senator Neal, sometimes there seems to be a stigma about needing help, mental health, and especially in the pandemic, we've seen that many of us have had different environments and different struggles. So what can we do to make sure that people don't need to hide the mental health issues that they're going through, and to make sure that they have access, especially in our minority communities, but in all our communities as well?
I think it's about, it's a culture shift, right? It's about changing the narrative about how we view each other and how we view mental health. It's not a weakness, it's an illness. And if we start to see it as an illness and want to actually have a remedy for it, I think that changes our viewpoint, and it changes how we care for each other. Within the minority community, I think more often than not, and it probably everywhere, you know, what I see with young black males is a stoicism, right? Where I rather hold on to the trauma, hold on to what happened to me rather than share it. And then it creates this chip on the shoulder per se, which then they have no place to express it because they feel like you don't understand it. And if I ask you for help, then you're going to give me potentially the wrong kind of help. And I'll give you this example. I had a student at Cheyenne High School. He'd been through the behavioral health system, and he was finally retracing himself and finding back in a regular school. But he didn't want to talk about his past. He didn't want to talk about the behavioral schools that he'd been in. But because of that, and the teachers not knowing his background, he was constantly viewed as a person that was not participating or wasn't open or wasn't trying to learn, but he was actually trying to overcome the stigma of where he came from, try to set a new path, and within the few months, he was literally being sent to the dean. And I had to point out, because he was one of my students, I had to point out to the principal, do you know his actual background? Because his background is that he is coming from a behavioral setting. He is trying to reset the narrative for himself, and you guys keep using it against him and putting it as if this is his tragic history, rather than allowing his future to be a different pathway and a different narrative that he creates for himself. Because he doesn't want to go back there, but he also doesn't want to talk about it. So whatever that trauma was of being identified as a bad kid, he is trying to escape it, but you won't let him. And we need to figure out how to create an environment where he can talk about that and he can participate in the new narrative that he would like to create for himself and support the new behavior. You know, because every time, whenever we made mistakes, right, in our house, in our life, no one ever wanted your past to be brought up to you over and over and over again. What we were expecting was someone to see the new change in you and to support the new change and to help you to develop and evolve into the new person that you had set before them, right? And I think the schools, because we use academic history, because we use behavioral narratives, we are not thinking about the whole child and how that whole child can evolve. And I think that that is more of a training that needs to occur. We have cultural competency, right? We pass that in legislation. But cultural competency doesn't matter if you don't understand what that child is experiencing or learn how to not beat them up over their past, but figure out how to get them to their next step, which they're asking you to help them get to.
I couldn't agree more, Senator Neal. And that segues into our next segment with Compassionate Las Vegas, and understanding that, you know, all of us at one point or another will have trauma or have it, and we want that new start and that new narrative. We want those tools that we can use to be successful, and we all need them, especially now in our community. Thank you, Senator Neal, and thank you for being a consensus builder and a bridge builder in our community. It's duly noted. And it's a great thing that we have had a change a little bit lately with some female representation in the legislature and some of these issues surrounding children that we work for at the Children's Advocacy Alliance improving are really at the forefront. So grateful for you and all your colleagues in the work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Senator Dina Neal. We are back with Will Rucker with Compassionate Las Vegas to continue our conversation about mental health in our community. Thank you, Will, for being with us today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I am so honored to be a part of this.
Thank you so much. Can you tell the community a little bit about you and your background and how Compassionate Las Vegas came to be?
Wow, that's a big story and a big topic. Just a little bit about me. I've always been someone that has wanted to change the world. And so that has just caused me to begin this journey and this evolution of how I can actually create the world that I want to see, which is a world filled with love and joy and happiness and compassion. And so that leads me to the work that I do now with my nonprofit organization, as a pastor of a church, just as a community voice that's saying, hey, compassion is what we need. It's not just a luxury. It is an absolute essential for our world today. So that's what brought me to this point, and Compassionate Las Vegas was birthed out of what we like to call whispering conversations, bringing together individuals who had a passion for certain sectors within our community who are doing great work, and saying, how about we do this great work side by side together? We all want to see this compassionate outcome. Why don't we work together to energize our forces and amplify our efforts? So we conducted a survey of our Jameson Fellows, and the Jameson Fellows actually is a program of Compassionate Las Vegas that started about 10 years ago in partnership with the United Way. So it's a full circle program. But we did a survey of our over 200 fellows and identified 3 major areas of interest. And from those 3 areas, we began having, again, conversations and building teams to really impact those areas. Those 3 areas turned into 5, and now we're just like, you know what, we're taking over the world with compassion.
I love that, Will. Thank you so much. And I did have the privilege to be a 2020 Jameson Fellow.
That's right.
And I'm so grateful that you are here helping with the work and leading it in our community to have a more compassionate Las Vegas. If there's ever a time when we need it, It seems like it's now coming through and out of a pandemic, and so we're grateful for all your work that you're doing here.
Thank you.
And I know you've talked about how when you are part of a community, and especially a compassionate community, that your mental health improves. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's a ton of research that's emerging. One of the hats that I wear, we were talking earlier about the many hats, but one of them is in substance misuse prevention. And what we're seeing the research show is the greatest asset for prevention is really a sense of belonging and community. And that's true for substance misuse as well as general mental health. And what we're seeing with social media is that we are more connected than we've ever been, but we're also more isolated. And there's always this idea of having to be good enough with the filters and all of the cool technology that's amazing, but it's also distorting our view of reality. And so while we are just a touch of a button away, we're also worlds away from each other. And so when we don't have the sense of community, we lose our sense of self, we lose our sense of safety and security because we are, for lack of a better term, pack animals. And so we thrive in community. A lot of people talk about the survival of the fittest, but the research shows that it's really the survival of the most compassionate. So those that were able to work in teams were those that were able to survive and thrive and build communities. And so when we are detached from that, our mental health suffers. We become depressed because we are built for interaction. We're built for love. And when we don't have that sense of family, of community, of belonging, it really deteriorates us at our core.
We also know that there's the collaborative healing that is happening in our community. Can you speak a little bit to that and its origination and where that's going?
Oh yeah, so that's a huge, huge asset for our community. Out of the 10-1 shooting was birthed the Las Vegas Healing Collaborative, and this is in partnership with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And Dr. Annie Weissman actually brought this to our community and recruited, I think the first training was about 100 of us in a room at UNLV. And the mind-body medicine is proven science, but it's not as wide known as some other methods. And with this mind-body medicine, we examine the connection between our brain and our body. We reconnect the mind with the body. And so one of my favorite parts of it is meditation. And meditation can be done in so many different ways. And through this collaborative, we teach people a number of ways to meditate. So whether it's journaling or drawing or shaking, and I won't do it because I've got a microphone on, but you stand up and shake, kind of like what you see in nature. After a traumatic event, animals just shake it off. Well, that proven science helps us to release that emotional energy and find ourselves centered.
I also want to talk to you a little bit about what we see with children. We find that the studies show that children that are involved in compassion or kindness in their lives just have better mental health and well-being. Can you speak to that a little bit, how you've seen that in the community through children and adults?
Oh my goodness. And to quote a very famous song, I believe that children are our future. And so I'm so honored with the network with Compassionate Las Vegas. We're partnered with Green Our Planet, and they build community gardens. And the children are taught skills of business, but all of the STEM is included, and it's just a amazing way to get kids to be kind without knowing they're being taught to be kind. And what we've seen, that's just one example of many. But what we've seen is kids by nature are compassionate. They can have an argument and you're like, oh my gosh, you guys are gonna rip each other's hair out. And then 2 minutes later, they're best friends again. And so kids really lead by example in the fact that, yes, we gotta get our feelings out. And that doesn't mean we can't be friends afterwards. And so this work, this compassionate work is allowing them, kind of like with the adults, the skills to learn how to express. We're teaching kids meditation. We're dealing with kids in trauma. The mind-body medicine actually has a youth track as well. So all of these kind of converge and create, again, the future through our kids. So one thing I'll mention too is we have a campaign with Hope Means Nevada that we're partnered with, where we're in the schools and putting on programs just to say it's okay to not be okay. and to give kids the resources when they are experiencing mental health issues to reach out and have them addressed. So Hope Means Nevada is a great partner that does that work. And I encourage everyone listening, just check them out and amplify their message because it's so needed right now.
Thank you, Will. And I'm a fan of Whitney Houston too. I love that song because the children are our future and they are the future of Nevada. And also in that song it mentions the greatest love of all is to love yourself, right? And not be looking, like you said, for outside sources, to have that inner peace and love. And we're so grateful for everything that you're doing. You mentioned a little bit about children and forgiveness. Can you talk about, you mentioned that before with Compassionate Las Vegas and the role that forgiveness and acceptance play?
Forgiveness is such a big topic, and it's a triggering topic for many because whether it's your religious background or just the culture of your family, there are many views on forgiveness. And so one of the things that we're working through is restorative justice. And sometimes people believe restorative justice is soft on crime or it doesn't actually work, which the research shows is the exact opposite. You're dealing with root causes and you're creating a reconciliation. Those that have been wronged actually are restored as well as the offender. And so in this conversation around forgiveness, it is so critical that we release this. Any burden that we're holding on, there's a common meme that goes around. It's like drinking poison and expecting someone else to suffer because of it. When you're harboring resentment and unforgiveness, it is such a weight, a burden for you personally. And sometimes you have unforgiveness and people don't even know that you have an issue. So communication is where it starts. Helping people to understand how to communicate clearly with being assertive, but with also, Brene Brown says it this way, clear is kind. And so communicating with clarity is actually showing kindness. So when we're talking about the issue of forgiveness, it's bigger than just, okay, you're not going to be punished for what you did. It really is an embrace and a restoration of an entire person, entire relationship structures. Because what we're seeing in our culture generally is harboring resentment. And it's amplified by fear. And the ultimate fear is what? Not belonging, not having that sense of security or safety. And what I have found personally is that it's a lot easier to forgive people quickly than to harbor resentment. I've found that it's a lot easier to work towards a society that supports all of us than to try to hoard things for myself, because the reality is desperate people anywhere is a danger to us everywhere. And so we have to address where people are. And this is an issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, really, if you want to think about it. Because when people don't have the resources to have that sense of self, to have that sustainable life, then they do desperate things. And we can't blame them for that. It's a systemic failure on our part because we've not provided them the very foundations of life. Our core instinct is self-preservation. That's something that we can't override no matter how hard we try. So we have to provide the things that people need in order for them to thrive. And so to encourage them to join this work, it's by example. My motto has been, be the change. It's so funny that that's kind of becoming a popular thing. And I'm like, that's been mine for a long time, as if I made it up, right? But
sure you did.
I'll take ownership, no.
And I would have to say that I believe the pandemic has exacerbated and shown us the difference that exists in equity and access for people to have these tools and these resources. And that's the culture that you're creating is one of care, caring for every individual as if they were you, right? Mm-hmm. And I see that happening. So how can individuals in the community connect with Compassionate Las Vegas? What is the action call we can put out here today to invite them in to Compassionate Las Vegas and living the principles, or trying them, or dipping their toe, or swimming, or letting go of the tree for a minute to see if that helps them, improves mental health and well-being in all of our community? What would you suggest?
Our website is a great resource, compassionatelv.org. It's got a ton of resources, and we point you to other folks. Again, we're a network of networks, And so we always refer back to the Charter for Compassion, which is really what birthed this. This is where our mission stems from. The Global Charter has over 440 cities and communities that are a part of it, and that number is growing. Australia, the continent/country, is a compassionate country. They've agreed to the charter. Our city here in Las Vegas adopted the charter unanimously. So there are a lot of resources we point to that way, but compassionatelv.org is our website, and you can always email us, connect@compassionatelv.org, and we're happy to come have a conversation, to introduce you to the different tools and programs that are available, to invite you into our network. We have a fantastic steering committee that really, from a high level, guides how we interact with our community. And they give us the secret sauce to each sector within our community, because everything's a little different. But there are so many ways to get engaged. The Jameson Fellowship is by invitation. And so if you know a fellow, ask them to get you invited, and then you can apply and hopefully be accepted into the program. So there are a number of entry points, and of course the one that I want to promote is our podcast. Compassion.Vegas will take you to our podcast home, but you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we have such a robust library of programs. Any subject we've talked to Dr. Weissman about the mind-body medicine. We've had Dr. Tyler on about children's advocacy and other things. So, I mean, just there's a long list of guests that are going to be inspiring and educational and informative. So that's how you get connected.
Thank you so much, Will. The work you do is inspiring, and I can't wait to see us become a compassionate country in the near future.
Absolutely. I think it's happening. We are moving towards compassion. Dr. King mentions that there's an arc towards our future, and that arc is towards love. And so I think we will definitely see not only our country, but our world be a place of compassion as a culture, just automatic.
Compassionate culture. Thank you so much, Will, for being here today.
Hi, I'm Isabel Santiago. I'm part of the Strong Start Governor's Cabinet, and I'm the Director of Mental Health and Wellness. Mental health is something very important to me because it is a topic that is often not talked about or just ignored. But we should not ignore mental health because K-12 students are struggling with it now more than ever due to the pandemic. So here are 3 things I can do in my community to better improve mental health. 1. Bring awareness and reduce the stigma of mental health. 2. Provide mental health resources for K-12 students. 3. Educate K-12 students on how to better cope with mental health, such as talking to a trusted adult, like a counselor, teacher, or parent. You can also start journaling. Journaling is a good way to express your emotions and feelings. I like to put on some relaxing music and color to my heart's content. We are the future, but we need to be seen, heard, and supported now.
Thank you for joining us for our very first podcast. Please be sure to tune in for our next podcast, where we'll be exploring early investments with Jamel Nance and Chelsea Bishop. Thank you.